Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the new Exorcist film, Exorcist Believer. This is a legacy sequel to the original Exorcist movie, which came out in 1973, so it's almost 50 years to the date. And in this movie, you guys, basically, there's two families involved this time around. Let's get that lamp out of the way. Sorry about that. I didn't frame this right before filming it. So there's two families that get involved in this story, and basically what happens is two of these girls within these families go missing. It's been 3 days, but they eventually are found within a forest, kind of like a farm that's near a forest actually. And something's not right when they bring them to the hospital. They look them over. There's something kind of off about them. They are able to bring both families are able to bring both girls home, but nothing seems right. One of them is a black family where it's a single father. He makes the one with the single father. He makes her breakfast one morning, and things are really not going right. There's nails in the tub. There's sludge in the tub. There's all this stuff where she was supposedly simply to get a bath, and it just didn't go right. So she's taken to the hospital. The girl from the white family is also eventually taken from the hospital as well. And so basically, something was brought back with them when they went to this forest. The one from the black family lost her mother at a young age, and so she has a lot of trauma and kind of regret going on with that. The white family, um, they're a very Christian family. They're a very they have, like, very much a set of house rules. They always go to church every Sunday and stuff like that. But anyway, they're both brought into this hospital, and it is kind of brought to the conclusion that they're both possessed from something. And it's safe to assume, since it's the Exorcist franchise, it's probably something along the line of Pazuzu, like in the first Exorcist film. And so both families have no idea what to do, so they get the help of Chris MacNeil, who has experience with this from the first Exorcist film. And so she's brought in with this, and she's played by Ellen Burstyn, just like from the first film. And she knows right away this is something from Pazuzu, like she experienced in that first Exorcist movie. And so both families come to the conclusion that an exorcism has to happen. And so over the course of this film, priests and Chris MacNeil and just both families and anything that they could take from their Christian faith or from other faiths. The single father of the black family, for example, he's not super religious based, but there's somebody that he knows that is aware of how exorcisms work and stuff like that. So he brings her into the mix. And so over the course of this film, they have to figure out how can we get rid of this demon from these two girls. What kind of exorcism needs to be performed? Can both girls even survive the exorcism? These are all big major questions that are asked over the course of Exorcist Believer. So overall, guys, kind of a hot take. I kind of enjoyed this movie. I know there's a lot of hate for this movie right now. I know Rotten Tomatoes has not been nice on this movie. I think it's at a rotten rating right now. I know a lot of fans aren't really being super nice to this movie right now either, but it's not bad. It's one of those movies where it's not quite as good as Exorcist 1. It's not as good as Exorcist 3. It's obviously light years better than Exorcist 2. I think everything is better than Exorcist 2. That's a terrible movie. And for me personally, I think I like this better than the prequels as well that came out years ago. So it's kind of one of those Exorcist movies where it's right in the middle. It's not horrible. It's not great. It's just kind of right in the middle of the road, kind of good. Where it's kind of there's things that are good about it, but there's things about it that could have been better. So let's go over some positives and negatives of why I feel that way. So first and foremost, kind of another hot take. I know this wasn't very popular amongst fans in this, but I kind of liked how Chris MacNeil was used in this movie, the character that Ellen Burstyn plays. It also shows just how trauma can shape a person. I almost kind of got a little teary-eyed when she was going over kind of how she's dealt with everything over the years, how her and Regan, Regan from the first film, how they've kind of went separate ways. They have a way of contacting each other if need be, but for the most part, they're really not in good hands with each other. They're really not close with each other the way they once were. She's published this book all about this experience that she had from the first movie, and obviously Reagan had nothing to do with it. She just wanted to be her own separate person, and so I really like how this film shows how trauma can really shape a person. Gotta get a pop up out of my thing here. Well, Safari, do not open while I'm filming my review. There we go. And so I like how the film shows how trauma can shape a person and make us into the people that we are. So I liked that aspect of the movie, and I liked how they brought Chris MacNeil in, regardless of how a lot of people are supposedly voicing how much they don't like how she was played in this. I know there's something about her getting paid triple or something like that just to be in this movie. But regardless of the movie itself, I like the way that her role was incorporated into the story and how this story kind of brings us into the whole world of Exorcist again, and we kind of see kind of her progress since the first movie. I also like the film's perspective on good and evil, kind of the balance of good and evil, how because there is something so terrible going on with these girls, clearly that's a sign that somewhere out in the universe, there is something really good out in the universe somewhere. And so the film plays with on the religious aspects of, because there is something so evil, there probably is something very, very good as well. And the film also talks about how being able to survive, being able to pursue, um, be able to take on all these really terrible things and show kind of our endurance as people, shows just how much good there is in the world and how we want evil to kind of be gone from the world forever if we're able to. And so I like the film's perspective on the balance of good and evil, and because there is something so evil, that there is probably something really, really good out there somewhere too. I also like how the film builds on suspense and makes us detect and makes us feel like there is something wrong with these girls. There is something that's probably going to be really bad going on with them. So the film does a good job building that suspense, really making us feel like something did not go right in the forest when they went in there. And so the film builds on that suspense. It makes us detect as an audience that something is not right with these girls. And I liked how the film plays on those expectations. I also thought the acting performances of the two young girls that get possessed in this movie are also very good. Um, the way that, obviously I'm sure there was a voiceover actor who did like the actual demon voices for them and stuff, but as far as them acting, the way that they have to really make it feel like there really is something really terribly wrong with them over the course of this movie, I thought both performances were very well done. So kudos to the two girls that played those characters. I thought both performances were very strong in this movie. I also like how the film kind of asks the question to the audience too. I'm not a parent myself, but I can only imagine how a parent could feel about the situation. How do parents kind of respond to the situation? How awful, how terrible would it be to put your child in the situation where an exorcism does have to get involved? And obviously, the exorcism of Emily Rose asked that question back when that movie came out too. Just how terrible would it be? Just how awful would it make you feel? Especially the idea that maybe the exorcism could go wrong and they don't live through it. And so there's just a lot of big questions like that that ask us as an audience, how would you respond to somebody that you loved or somebody that you knew that was going through something like this? And so the film asks us these really big questions that sometimes doesn't always have the easiest answers. But for my negatives of The Exorcist Believer, I think it does lean into the fantastical a little too much by the third act of this movie. There's just a lot of moments where where the girls, sorry, my voice is kind of giving up. Where the girls have to do these things to kind of get the demon out of their bodies. And like I said, it does kind of lead into the fantastical a little bit too much by Act 3, in my opinion. So I thought that aspect of the film was a little weak. It just it went from like a grounded in reality story to kind of a more fantastical way of getting rid of the demons. So I thought that aspect of the story was a little too fantastical, in my opinion. I also don't feel like this film really brings anything new to the franchise. If you've seen Exorcist 1, if you've seen Exorcist 3, the two better installments in this franchise, in my opinion, you've kind of already seen kind of the best of this franchise as far as installments that bring something new to the franchise, something that gives us something unique and different for an experience. I don't think this film does necessarily anything new or different. And I think that's also what's kind of turning a lot of people off with this movie. So for those who think that this film is probably not going to really bring anything new to you, unfortunately, I think this is another Exorcist film that kind of does that, unfortunately. It just doesn't really bring anything new. It just kind of does the stuff that we like the best in kind of an okay way. So that's another negative I have with this movie. Is it doesn't really bring anything new to the franchise. I also don't like how the setup of the story is created because of bad choices that are caused by the girls that get possessed in this movie. Really kind of a weak way to handle that, in my opinion. It really is just one of those stories where everything's happening because bad choices were made amongst these teenage girls. Clearly they shouldn't have gone to that forest. Clearly they shouldn't have been doing what they were doing. There's even a part of the movie where they talk about how there's a bad homeless problem in the area and it's near the forest of that town. So there's just a lot of things just like, okay, girls, did you really have to do what you had to do to make this story happen the way it did? So unfortunately, their reasoning behind getting possessed is kind of on them, unfortunately. So I didn't like how the whole setup of the story was bad choices were made in order for this overall story to happen. So I thought that aspect was kind of weak too. I also really, it was never really clear what demon this was. Clearly this probably is Pazuzu, probably, just because it is the Exorcist world and it is that franchise. But it's never really clear what demon this is. The demon knows who Reagan is, so clearly if it's not Pazuzu, it's something that knows Pazuzu or knows the people that Pazuzu has tried possessed on Earth and stuff like that. But it's never clear what demon this is. So that's one disappointing aspect of this movie is what demon is this? Is this Pazuzu? Is this something else? The few flashing images we see of this character doesn't really look like Pazuzu, so it's kind of hard to tell who this character is. So I thought that aspect of the story was a little disappointing too. I also don't know what they have in mind for a trilogy for this new story. I know the next one's going to be called Exorcist Deceiver if they end up making it. There's a couple different directions, like, okay, well, this character lives, so they can probably do that. Pazuzu's probably not completely gone yet, so they can probably do that. This one character shows up at the end, they can probably do something with that. But for the most part, I don't know what they could do for two additional stories to this story. So that's one kind of head scratcher with this movie is I don't really know what they could do for two additional stories to this story. So that's going to be one thing that's going to be interesting where if Blumhouse does greenlight two more sequels here in the next couple months or even within the next year, it'll be interesting to see what exactly they do because at the moment I have a couple ideas for what they could do, but I don't have a clear vision of where exactly this so called trilogy is going to be going. But overall, guys, I'm going to give Exorcist Believer an 8 out of 10. I think it's not a bad movie. It's just not a great movie either. It's just kind of a middle-of-the-road Exorcist film where it doesn't really offend you the way Exorcist 2 did, The Heretic, but it's not as good as like Exorcist 1 or Exorcist 3. It's not going to be kind of going down in the books as a classic the same way those films did. So 8 out of 10. I would say go into this film with caution. There was somebody online that said if you enjoyed the trailers for this movie, you might like this movie as well. And I kind of agree with that statement. I really enjoyed the trailers for this. I enjoyed David Gordon Green's 2018 Halloween film. He worked on this film as well. So there was kind of that side of me, positive side of me going into this as well. So 8 out of 10. Really enjoyed this movie. Like I said, not a great movie though. Go into it knowing that it is kind of flawed in some areas, but for the most part, if you're an Exorcist fan, I would say give this a try. And if you're not an Exorcist fan, I don't think this is going to turn you into a fan at all. But 8 out of 10 for me, kind of a middle of the road Exorcist film. 8 out of 10 for me.